Šta da kažem? Čuje se. Ne čujem ništa. Dobro.
Okay. Hi everyone again. Next talk we have Irina. She will talk about pragmatic architecture. Very, very interesting topic. And if you have any question, feel free to ask them online on our bot. And meanwhile, enjoy the talk.
Thank you. Hello everyone. So let me just first introduce myself. Can you hear me? It's a little bit strange feeling because I don't have headsets, so I'm kind of talking in vain. I'm Irina, and let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I have a mixed developer and teaching background. So for a while I used to live in Italy and I was working in startups and mid-sized companies. Then for a while I worked as a university professor, so I guess that among public there might be some students of mine, or at least I'm hoping. And right now I'm working as a solutions architect for NOVOMATIC lottery solutions. So as you can see, the title of my talk today is going to be Pragmatic Architect. Why pragmatic? Because the idea that I want to share with you is actually to point you the best practices and maybe some pitfalls that you will want to avoid in your journey towards being an architect. But before I go to that, let me just briefly tell you something about the company that I'm representing here. It's NOVOMATIC Lottery Solutions. So some time ago, 5 years ago, it was a little startup, Icelandic startup called Betware, and they had offices in Reykjavik and Belgrade. And they were unique because they were the only one in the world that had an online lottery platform. Later on, Betware was acquired by NOVOMATIC, and now we are NOVOMATIC Lottery Solutions, or shorter NLS. So what we do actually is creating complete solutions, complete platforms, omni-channel solutions for all kind of draw games and number games and everything else you can imagine. So what is our competitive advantage is actually that we have already service architecture in place, so we are able to offer omni-channel solution, which means that you can play on the web, on the mobile, and also through retail channels, through terminals that you're used to seeing at retailers. We have a stand here in front of this room, so if there is anything else that you want to know about the company, just approach us and we would be glad to help you. Also, of course, as anyone, all other companies here, we are hiring, so if you're interested in working with us, please just come and talk to us. So, now let me get back to the topic of my talk. You have been appointed as software architect. That usually comes, the story goes like this. You're probably senior developer, or you have spent a long time in the company and your effort is noticed, or you have some kind of technical excellence. So it happens that you are promoted and have this title of software architect. Sometimes it happens that architect is not actually a title, but instead a role. It is a hat that a developer just takes and takes this duty without being actually officially promoted to be an architect. I guess that is the case, at least is the case in all the companies that I know of. Is there anyone here that is already working as an architect or thinking about moving to this role? great. Then I hope that my advice would be beneficial for you. So one thing that I want to point out to you is that if you decide to take on this role, then you must not question your loyalty to the company, because decisions that you make will shape the future success or failure of that company. So it's not just like as it was when you were a developer. So if you are an architect, that you have been entrusted with the well-being of your organization, so it's expected of you to have ethics and to avoid any conflict of interest and give your company undivided loyalty. Before everything, every architect is a developer. I don't know of any architect that hasn't been developer before. That means that if you pass to this role from the developer role, you will have certain challenges in front of you. And for some time, it is going to be difficult for you to forget that you are actually a developer or used to be a developer, because now your responsibilities are different. You will be tempted to stand over the shoulders of developers and watch them how they implement your ideas. But this is not what you should be doing. You should actually be thinking globally, thinking in larger scale, and making sure that every piece of the solution that you design fits well. Or in the words of Martin Fowler, which is one of my favorite role models, he says, an architect's value is inversely proportional to the number of decisions that he or she makes. What he wanted to say with this is that actually you should give developers freedom. You are here to pose some constraints, but then you should not be standing over their shoulders and watching everything they are doing. You should enable them to do their job the best way they can, because remember, you have been developer before, so you know how it is. Also, whoever tells you that when you pass to the architect role, you shouldn't be coding anymore is lying. Because in my opinion, and I strongly believe in this, the time you spend coding with your team, or if it's multiple teams, if you are working on a large-scale solution, the time you spend coding is precious for you as an architect, because you will be in the belly of the beast while it's being created. And you will be able to see it from inside and outside. So don't ever forget about that. Don't ever stop coding if you have a chance to. Da govorim. Chances are that the biggest problems that you're going to face are not going to be technical. This may come as a surprise to you, because it's dealing with people. As a developers, you're used to dealing with machines. So you code, you compile or you don't compile, and you run, and it either works or it doesn't work. In this case, you are mostly dealing with people. So you have to be able to present your ideas in a very, very precise and concise way. This is a skill that you must practice. Because if you start as an ivory tower architect and start writing documents 100 pages long that nobody's going to read, and it will result in a product that barely resembles the original specifications, then you're doomed. What you should be doing instead is writing simple diagrams just with any tool like Visio, or even just drawing on a whiteboard. But you have to be able to present your ideas both to the technical team and to the business, and to be clear with that. This is one of the most important skills, in my opinion, that architect needs to have. That being said, you have to you have to have technical breadth and depth. It means that you will not be the master of all trades. There will be some areas in which you will be very knowledgeable. There will be some areas that you will be acquainted with, and then there will be some areas in which you will be totally incompetent. But it's your task as an architect to constantly learn and to know about all the technologies that are that you're considering as a possibility to be implemented, or that you hear. Just 5 minutes internet search is enough sometimes, but you have to have this breadth. And you have to have also the depth, because there has to be areas in which you are very, very competent. So, as Mark Richards said, one of the famous architects says, if communication is king, then clarity and leadership are its humble servants. So I talked to you about the clarity, and now a little bit by the leadership. An architect is also always, always a leader. If you are not able to gain trust from your developer team, then you are nothing more than a project manager. Because the team will look into you and ask guidance from you. That doesn't mean that you need to have all the answers to all their questions, but you have to be technically sound and to provide them support whenever they need it. That also means, for example, that you should never consider using something in your design, software design, that you haven't personally implemented or tried before. So, if you haven't installed a server, let's say, yourself, then just don't propose to them to do it. If you haven't coded against some framework, then just don't use it, because you will introduce additional risk to the project. And when the problems come, you will not have the answers. And as a result of all that, you will lose the confidence of your developers, and that is the last thing you want to do. You want them to see you as a role model and to help them when the troublesome times come, and they will come. So, it's easy to get lost into design. It's easy to just close in your ivory tower and draw diagrams and think high level. But you must always listen to the people that implement your design, because they will give you always valuable feedback. If they have, for example, problems writing unit tests, then just help them out. Maybe there is something wrong. Maybe you have to decouple interfaces, for example. If they have problems implementing your API, then maybe you haven't designed it to be clear enough, or you just have to talk to them. Or simply, maybe there is a flaw in your design that they just discovered, so design has to be improved or changed. So never work in isolation. Make atmosphere so that when developers have problems, you step in to help, or even better, they just come to you and ask you for help. That means that they have confidence in you and they expect from you to give them support. When designing something, it is not your job just to design and hand the design off to somebody and just expect it to be implemented. You should be involved in day-to-day process of creating this software product, whatever it may be. That means that if teams have problems of any kind, if the system they are working is slow or has any other flaw, you need to do whatever you can do to make their life easier. If you have dependencies, for example, with third parties, then create simulators. Just isolate the dependencies, mock the services. You yourself, I mean. Because the architect, in my opinion, should be capable of replacing any other team member. That means that you should be able to write code, to write unit tests, to write automated tests, to set up the build, to set up the continuous integration server and to solve any problem that they might have in their daily work. And this is not something that you should just, let's say, delegate to the others. If you see that the team is struggling with something, then just jump in and help them. Don't just be architect with a big A. So, for example, in our projects, we are struggling with test automation. We are really, really struggling. So, this is one of my favorite topics. I don't consider this to be something that is maybe behind, something that architects shouldn't do. Actually, I want to be actively involved with every step in the process of creating software. And especially, you need to be present when there are integration points. This is a major source of pain, at least it was for us and the systems that we are creating. Whenever we had integration, it was really, really a pain. So if you have an opportunity to make developers' life, not just developers, QA's team, I mean the whole team, life easier, then by all means do it. Okay. Just a second. Another thing that is maybe often forgotten is that if the business, just a second, can you hear me? If the business knew how to create the software they need, then they won't be calling us. They wouldn't need our help. So it's us that are guardians of the technical quality of the solution. Don't ever expect from the client to tell you, oh yes, it will be very beneficial if we had automated testing. Or, what, you don't have unit tests? I won't accept this. This will never happen. So it is your duty as an architect in front of the technical team to guard the technical quality of the product you are delivering. Don't ever forget that. So if there is a chance, and there is always a chance, that business will push for some features, try to negotiate. Try maybe to postpone some features to the next release. Or try to negotiate in every way, but still keep this aim in your head always, that you have to guard the technical quality because nobody else will. And again, I would like to go back to the topic of autonomy of developers. Give them all the tools, top-notch computers. If they need training, then make sure they get it. Make sure that they are actively involved in the process of making decisions. You don't have to make all decisions on your own. The more decisions they can make on their own, the better. That means that you have the shared vision of what you are creating together. And don't ever keep them in dark regarding decisions that have to be made, because this is a clear recipe for disaster. In our company, it's not like that. I don't know. I would like to hear maybe later, if you are willing to talk to me, what is the situation in other companies? Do you have architects at all? Do you have a role of the architect? And do you have different types of architects? Because, for example, we at NLS have enterprise architects, solution architects, which is, let's say, my job, and infrastructure architects. And all of these roles have kind of different responsibilities, but they all collaborate on the same goal. When the system goes live and you have something in production, inevitably you will have a request for a new feature, or let's say just a simple bug fix, nothing more. And more often than not, you will be in the situation to decide whether you're going to roll out this change quickly and dirty, because the business wants it as soon as possible, or you will take the time to implement it properly as QAs and developers will want. So they will want the time to design it, to implement it, to test it properly, to do performance testing, and the whole cycle as by the book. More often than not, this will end up as just roll out this out of the door as soon as possible. Your job then is not to forget that you introduced technical debt. And this technical debt will come back to you as an interest. Like when you're spending on the credit card. You're spending during the month and then you have to pay at the end of the month. If you don't, you have to pay the interest. And we all know how we like paying interests. So, in this case, do what you have to do. Roll out the change. Make it live. But then make sure that developers come back and design it and do it the way it should have been done from the start. If you don't do this, then the quality of the system will surely degrade and you will have to pay this interest. It will cost you a lot more at the end. So don't just push it and forget about it. Always forget to pay back your technical debt. As an architect, you will probably have a chance to talk with clients. And as I said, clients usually maybe know what they want, but they don't know how to get to it. And they will not be, in many occasions, able to tell you what they want from the system. Sometimes they will just tell you, we want it to be usable. What is usable? Or, which is a hype these days, we want the system to be scalable. What is scalable? We want it to be fast. These are not requirements, because this will not allow you to design the system properly. You will have only some vague idea of some blurred requirements. So in this case, you have to go back to the client and ask him to quantify this quasi-requirements they have. So if they say the system must be scalable, then you ask how many new users you expect, in what time period, from where will they come. Ask any type of question that will help you quantify the requirement so that when the system is actually implemented, you can measure if the requirements are met or not. So this is also one of the important jobs that maybe during your life as a developer you didn't have much chance to experience. When you are making architectural decisions, make sure that they are written, because non-recorded decision is not a decision. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It just needs to be a single artifact that documents the decision or decisions that have been made. Why? Because this document will communicate to developers what did you actually decide and what are the architectural guidelines. Then it will force you to reason, either at that moment or maybe later, if the foundations of your thinking are solid, are still solid and valid. If the same issue reappears again, you will not have to reconsider it. You will also already have it written. And this is very important. So, as developers, we tend to just write code and forget about it. We admit, you rarely write comments, not to say documentation. Nobody wants to write documentation. In architecture, this is of paramount importance. You cannot just ignore writing documentation. There is another thing that you must get used to in your transition to work as an architect. The results of your work will not be visible immediately. And this is something we are used to as developers. You may have to wait maybe until the system goes live, or even some months later until you see child diseases pass. So you have to exercise patience. You have to trust and just be patient to see the results of your work. This is not easy. This is not easy. Because you work for maybe a year or two, and you still don't know if the decisions that you made are right or wrong. This is something that I find very, very difficult. Then you have to be self-organized. Because if, as I assume, most of you work in agile environments, you have a team, and this team usually has a scrum master, or if not, you have probably some project manager who maintains the backlog of your tasks for you. At least I was used to that. In this case, you don't have anyone above you. It is on you to organize yourself, to create a backlog of your tasks, to prioritize these tasks, because if you don't tackle something that needs attention at this moment, you may fail. So this is also something to keep in mind. Sometimes it's just boring job. It's not always interesting. You might be excited with this new position, saying, yeah, and I'm an architect, I'm a decision maker, I am somebody. But in most of the days, your work is just mundane. It's just writing documents, talking to people, trying to find a way out of trap. Some things that you don't actually find very interesting, but they're just part of your daily job as an architect. And always remember, an architect is the one who takes the blame for the quality of the software. This is my definition. Hopefully, if you are successful in your job, the blame will not be the blame, it will be the honor. But we see many failing projects. And sometimes projects fail because of people, in most of the cases. We've all seen architects that just see developers as people hired to implement their design. And if you try to challenge their design, they just offend. Don't do this. Put your ego aside. Because if you don't, you will fall into this trap of architect with a big A, and you shouldn't be doing that. At least you should avoid this source of failure that will be entirely your fault. And there is no I in architecture. This might be my personal opinion, but we may argue about this. I like to work this way. So this is pretty much everything that I wanted to tell you about all the advices and pitfalls that I at least wanted to share with you in this talk. So if you have, maybe I finished a little bit early, but if you have some questions, here I am, just.
Thank you. This is very interesting topic, I would say. While we're waiting for questions, I have few or one.
Yeah.
So first thing is like, what is your thoughts about the conflicts that may arise in team between the architects and the team or person from the team, like regarding some technical solutions? So one vote for the one solution, the other one clearly says the other solution is better. So I don't know.
You mean you have members of the team that propose different solutions?
Yeah.
Specifically for this case, for example, in our company, we use a decision-making framework.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
This is something called DASI. I don't know the exact
okay,
name.
yeah.
So we confront both solutions based on some common criteria. And we write that down. And then we make decisions. We have the proponents of the solution, and we have the reviewers, and we have a person that doesn't necessarily has to be an architect that makes the final decision.
From the team or?
Can be from the team, but can also be other person that is deeply involved in this technology that we are deciding. But in my opinion, decision about technology should always be on the teams, because eventually the teams are implementing the software, and if something goes wrong in production and architect said, I don't know, you have to use hibernate, then this architect must come and fix the bug in production, because he is the one who is accountable for the solution being implemented. Otherwise, if the team is free to choose their own tools, then the team should be also able to maintain the child, the application that they created.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so as an architect, you said that you have to continue to code, but I don't understand. Are you then a part of the team? Are you involved in coding the project, or are you just developing your skills when you continue to code?
It depends. It depends. Sometimes architect is involved in coding. Sometimes, if you are asking about our organization, sometimes he or she is not. But I personally prefer to be involved in any kind of coding because I like coding. It's just my skill. I cannot just throw it away and say I don't enjoy coding, because I do. But it doesn't have to be. You can, for example, help the team write the unit tests, or you can create a template for them to follow, or you can just think about some naming convention, or you can implement a class that serves as a template for something else, or you can think about how to best do automation testing. So any kind of coding. It's not, I didn't really mean coding just the product. Just a second.
Okay, as an architect, what do you think about code refactoring and how often we should do it?
In my opinion, coding is not creating, it's gardening. So, if you plant and then you don't maintain, you know how your garden will look like. So if you come to the point that you say, this software has to be refactored, you're already late. I'm afraid that this software is already lost. So as a developer, yeah.
Sorry.
As a developer, you should always be doing little improvements, but don't do it all the time. Whenever you see an opportunity to refactor something, do it right then and right now.
But sometimes you have to make hard decisions, I don't know.
Yes, but if you do it one step at a time, you will never come to a situation that you have to say, now this software has to be refactored.
No, basically...
It's not easy. I know that it's not easy, but it is the right way. Because if you wait, then you will never have the time, and you will never have the permission from the management to give you 1 month or 3 months to do the refactoring from zero. You know that better than I do.
Yeah, of course that's true, but sometimes you make hard decisions like we did the refactoring like a lot of times, and then you see, okay, there's no point to refactor because we are losing some time, okay?
I don't get it. How can then there be no point of refactoring? If you decided to refactor, then you must have seen that something is wrong.
Yeah,
that
of course.
Code smells.
Yeah, of course, and developers can complain that something should be refactored, and then architects is to make decision if this one is okay, so we don't do refactoring or do it. But then I'm asking like how often should be applied or not.
Every
you-
day, every
yes,
day.
every day.
Every day, whenever you see a chance.
One question. Do you need an architect for already established project? If you're not doing something like a greenfield, but you have a big, stable project, is it worth to pay an architect for that?
Well, it depends on, I guess, on the state of the project. If this project is not documented, then it's really difficult for anyone to get into gritty-nitty details of this project. I don't see the point of introducing an architect unless some major changes have to be made or some major features have to be implemented. But it's usually then, what I see in practice is that there is usually a developer that knows the code base very well. And this developer usually takes the hat of the architect. Whenever something needs to be changed, people know who to come to ask. I don't see the point of just assigning somebody just for the sake of assigning.
Hello. In your opinion, or if you had a previous experience, is it possible to be considered an architect on 2 or perhaps even more separate projects at a single time? And how does that work?
Yes, we have a single person in our company that we come to whenever we don't know the answer. So this person has been with the company a long time, I guess since the beginning, and he knows not only the state of the facts, but also how the things were evolved during last, let's say, 10 years. So, yes, there can be. There are not many such persons, but probably yes. Yes, he doesn't have answer to everything, but he has the most. He's the most knowledgeable of all of us.
Hi. Okay. I presume that you're a software architect, that you work on multiple projects.
Not necessarily, because a solution architect usually works on a single project at a time.
Okay, but in your career you have worked on several.
Yes, but not as an
Okay.
architect. Let's just. As a
So,
developer.
how do you enforce? I suppose that you have some naming conventions and some things that are static and common on all projects. So how do you enforce them amongst other developers? And which are those standards that you want to enforce?
We would like to enforce, but to be honest, we are not very successful with that. For example, we want to impose unit testing, and we have teams that do diligent unit testing. We, for example, require 80% coverage, but we have teams that actually don't do unit testing. So there is not a strict policy. We just go and talk to them and try to convince them and to teach them what are the best practices. But then again, it's a team culture that prevails, unfortunately. But we are always trying to educate when we see that there are teams that are maybe falling behind and not following the common practices in the company.
Hello. You weren't talking about motivation of an architect.
Yes.
Every developer has a motivation, but what is the motivation of architect to implement and learn new technologies, as you were talking?
Well, as I said...
in your opinion?
As I said, I would never use a technology that I haven't personally tried before. Because you can you hear me?
Yes.
Then you cannot really provide guidance to the others. But you know, as a developer, you're kind of accepted that you will be learning during your whole lifetime as a project. So it's practically the same. I mean, there is always a curiosity. You never lose it. Whether you are a developer or an architect, there is no difference.
Don't you think that that curiosity should be on something that isn't working right, and then that is the reason why you are learning something new and transferring to new system
I didn't.
or new framework.
Can you rephrase the question because I didn't get what actually are you asking? Me?
What is the motivation to implement new technologies as an architect? Because you are learning. It is not just learning like let's learn something new, but is it that you see something that is not good in your code and then you learn about a new framework that should provide better solutions for that problems.
Yeah. Maybe this is one of the things that I haven't mentioned. That one of the tasks of the architect is to keep an eye on tech radar and to follow all new technologies that are around, to be at least acquainted with them. So as you know, the things are getting better. There are always new frameworks, better ways to do things. So. This is the motivation, simple. So if you see an opportunity to improve something, then you just discuss it with, it is not my decision. It is not that I come and say, I don't know, tomorrow we are going to use Scala and Akka. That will never happen. But if you see that some problem that you have in front of you has the right tool to solve this problem, then you will propose it and then discuss with other colleagues, and maybe it will be accepted. But you always have to account for the learning curve, and you always have to think about that this software has to be maintained. So sometimes the decision is made. Do you have developers that will develop in this new technology that you would like to try?
Okay, that's about it. It's already the time. So, of course, if you have more questions,
yeah, I'll be around,
feel free to
ask me.
And, of course, that's the point of the conference. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.